Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. My name is Christy. I'm one of the co-presidents of the UCLA Pre-PA Club this year. And I just wanted to give a big thank you again to UCLA Pre-PA Transfer Association for putting on this amazing event for all of you guys. Our goal of the club is pretty similar to the Pre-PA Transfer Association. So we are trying to familiarize students with the PA profession and helping them become stronger applicants, providing community service opportunities, as well as guest speakers and workshops and a mentorship program.
Thank you so much, Christy. So very similar to the Pre-PA Club at UCLA, Pre-PA Transfer Association provides resources for UCLA Pre-PA transfer students, and we educate them about the journey to becoming a PA. We have a great mentorship program that you can check out on Instagram. And I just wanted to give a brief announcement that we have an active giveaway going on. We're giving away one copy of the Physician Assistant School Personal Statement Guide by Savanna Perry. Anyone is welcome to participate in this giveaway. Entries will close tomorrow, Sunday at 10 a.m. PST, and the date of which the winner will be announced. So just head on over to our Instagram. It's at UCLA Pre-PA Transfers to enter, as well as explore our other resources there. So Savanna, I know you've been really busy with moving and unpacking, so thank you so much for making the time to be here today. If you can please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what solidified your desire to go into medicine specifically. Why did you pursue the PA profession? And let me just quickly make you host right now.
Okay, awesome. I think it should work. Oh, I think I have to let people in the waiting room know. I don't know. Someone else can too. Okay, there we go. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, sorry for the bare, boring, yellow background, because we are in the process of moving right now. But happy to talk about personal statements, and y'all are awesome for doing that giveaway. But I have kind of always been interested in medicine. I learned about PAs when I was in high school. And then once I got to college, I was able to shadow. That solidified for me that going the PA school route was going to be the best option for me. Just with the way the schooling and education was set up, being able to kind of get out there and start working, being able to have some flexibility in my work schedule, and have that teamwork, collaborative approach to patient care, which was what I really wanted to be involved with. So I've been a dermatology PA now for 6.5 years, and I practice in Georgia. And I've only ever worked in derm. So I haven't used really the lateral mobility part of it. But I enjoy derm, and I plan on staying in that area as much as possible.
Okay, so thank you, Savanna. Next, we can go ahead and move forward with your presentation, and then it's going to be followed by a Q&A session.
Sure. Okay, let me get my presentation going. And if for some reason this doesn't advance, let me know. Okay, so I love talking about personal statements. I really love talking about all things pre-PA, but to me, the personal statement and the interview are so important. So that's where I focus a lot. And y'all mentioned the book. So this is my personal statement guide that just came out a few weeks ago. It took me about 3 years to finally get this done, a little bit longer than you typically have for a personal statement. But it's hard, and I mean, if you are applying to PA school, you may not have written an essay like this since you applied to college, if you even had to do one for that. I don't even think I had to write any essays for college. So it's a more personal essay. It's not like an essay you write for your lit class. And that can be a little difficult because most people do find it hard to talk about themselves and to put those types of things on paper. So we'll talk a little bit today about what needs to be in your personal statement, how you can get started on it, and really make it, I mean, you're going to have multiple drafts, but make it so that you have a good first draft that you can build off of and get to that final product. Are most people here applying this cycle, or do we have like a variety? I don't know. Can't see the chat. So even if you aren't applying this cycle, this stuff is still important because you can start thinking about your essay and making notes to try to have some stuff to go on when it is time for you to apply. Okay. So I say this a lot on social media, and I'm pretty much just at the PA platform everywhere, but your personal statement is what gets you the interview. The interview is what gets you accepted to PA school. When it comes to the application, at this point in time, if you've checked all the boxes and gotten to the point where the school actually looks at your application, you have what they're looking for. You have the coursework, the grades, the experience, and those things are important. But when you start to look at it on an application and you're looking at a bunch of them, they all run together and they all look similar. And that can make it hard to differentiate between candidates until you get to the personal statement. And the essay is what helps to differentiate students because you get to see who they are, you get to learn about them, you get to see a little bit more about their personality or what's important to them. And it really helps to show and gives you the chance to explain why you want to be a PA. So I kind of jumped ahead, but then once you get to the interview part, you get to actually show them in person what you put on your application and hopefully get accepted into PA school. So a little bit about the essay, and these things are important to keep in mind. You have 5,000 characters to write your essay, and that's including spaces. This comes out to about a page and a paragraph, single spaced. It's not that much room. So your essay has to be very, very focused on the prompt, and the prompt changes a little bit between years, but it's always a variation of why do you want to be a PA? So discuss your motivations for becoming a PA, explain why you chose the PA profession, something along those lines. And it will be entered directly into CASPA. It's not uploaded. You don't upload a Word document or a PDF, you just copy and paste it in there. I do not recommend having CASPA as the only place where you write your essay. You want to write it outside of that. You want to write it in a Google Doc or somewhere that it's going to save automatically so that you don't lose your work. And the personal statement does not carry over between cycles. So if you do end up having to reapply or you aren't applying yet and you decide to put some thoughts in there, they won't come back when you start your application for the next cycle. So we look at just kind of the steps. How do we do this? I think it's important to start with brainstorming and organizing your thoughts before just starting to try to write. And this is my process. Your process may be different, but this is where if you aren't applying this cycle, if you start a note on your phone or a Google Doc where you just list out kind of what I refer to as pivotal moments, the things that stand out to you, and that can be specific experiences, a tough day, a great day, a specific patient, something that makes you either question what you're doing or confirm that you're on the right track. So those things are stuff that you might incorporate into your essay. You may not, or you may use it for a supplemental later on too. So you just having that kind of ideas will make it easier to recall when it does come time to write your essay. On the PA platform, which is my website, we have a few tools for this. So there is some brainstorming worksheets. They're in the book as well, and they're a little bit more in depth that kind of has some specific prompts to give you some ideas of things to include. I think if the link for that is just the paplatform.com/downloads. Or if you just Google the PA platform free downloads, it'll come up. So that can help you just get started. When it is time to write, You can choose, paper or computer. I really like to write things out on paper, almost like a journal entry, just to kind of get thoughts out. I think people get stuck sometimes by trying to have a perfect intro right from the beginning, and they want it to, I don't know what to start with. I don't know what to start with. You can change that, and all of that probably will change while you're writing your essay. So don't worry about figuring out right from the beginning what you're going to start with or what the conclusion is going to be. Just start thinking about why you want to be a PA and write that out. Tell your story, and then you can polish it and make it a little bit better. So for me, like if I'm trying to write, I have to get rid of all distractions. So no phone, no TV, no emails, no notifications, no social media, I can't even really do well with music, to be honest. And I set a timer. I can usually go about 20 or 30 minutes of just kind of writing, getting some ideas out, and not thinking too much about those. If that's hard for you, another option is to use a transcription app. There's one called Otter. It's free. You get a certain amount of minutes, but it's a lot. But you can get on that and just talk and, say, like, maybe go through the brainstorm sheets and talk about why I want to be a PA or how I found out about PAs, and it'll actually transcribe it. It does it very accurately, surprisingly. So that may give you some things to start with, or you could turn that into note form or take some of those ideas and put those into your essay as well. So as you start writing, then you can really refine things. Chronological order is important. It just makes your essay easier to read and easier to follow. Throughout this process, keep the kind of end goal in mind, which is that at the end of this, an admissions committee person is going to be reading your essay, that they've read probably thousands of essays. They're reviewing tons of applications. So make it easy for them. If you're making it so that it's confusing and they're not really sure what you're talking about, that's not going to go over that well. And the person who reads your essay may not be the person who reviewed your application, or they may not have your application right in front of them while they're reviewing it. So if you're referring to 2016, in 2016, this happened. I don't know if you were 10 years old or 30 years old, or if you were in college or what was going on at that time. So you want to have some context in there that helps your reader. Once you feel like you've got a great draft, editing is next, and we'll talk about editing more, but you do need to polish off your essay, and then getting some other people's opinions to make sure you're on track, look for any red flags and that kind of thing. This graphic in here is pulled from the PAEA study. They do a study each year about just pre-PA students in general, and kind of looking at every part of the application between schools. So this is interesting. I mean, these are common, they say themes. I would say more just include information. The gray is people who were accepted and started PA school. The green is people who were not accepted. They're fairly similar. You'll notice the matriculants, probably the biggest difference is they focus on role models a little bit more. Non-matriculants focused on personal characteristics, which are important to include, but can be incorporated to the point where you're not just saying, like, I'm a great person, I'm great with patients, they really like me. You can show those things a little bit more than just stating them. And then emphasizing experience was clearly important in the essay. All right, so I talked about this a little bit. So the things you want to think about here when you're kind of doing your brainstorming is those pivotal moments. So for me, like thinking back, it's when I found out about PAs, but even before then, thinking about when did I really think that I wanted to be in medicine? Why is this something I liked? Why did I pursue this? And doing some kind of just soul searching to figure those things out. And after you have figured out what led you to these decisions, then you can focus on the things that you've done and what steps have I taken to further achieve these goals and start to go into some detail there. And so I talked about the worksheets. If you go to prepacourses.com, there's some personal statement stuff there. And then we have, I put together, it's a free 2-week email course that you get an email each day to help you get a draft completed. Basically, it's each day there's like 15 to 30 minutes of something for you to do to get that draft done. And so that's at that bottom link. If you just search for it, it'll come up though too. And then we actually are doing a CASPA boot camp for anyone applying. Oh gosh, I guess the sign-up's closed, but if you really want to do it, I think it's still open right now. I'm supposed to close it. So you could probably still sign up, but we're going to have a CASPA day there, and then that'll be available afterwards too. Okay, so when we get to content, which is the most important thing, we want to make sure there are certain questions that you're answering. And when I'm editing essays, this is what I'm looking for. Number one, what made you interested in medicine? With any of these questions, don't feel like you have to have this major aha moment or this crazy event that happened that led you to this. I didn't have that. Most people don't have that, and that's completely fine. You can still have an interesting story because it's your story and it'll be unique regardless, as long as you are telling it in a genuine fashion. So what made you interested in medicine? For me, it was just my sister has an autoimmune disorder. And so growing up, I was kind of in and out of doctor's offices with her. So I had a little bit more exposure than maybe a normal child to doctors. And so I got to see a lot of things because she was younger than me. So I had a little more understanding of what was going on at the time. And so that's, not super exciting, but it's the truth. And that's what I included in my essay. So it may be a personal medical issue with a family member or with yourself. I also just feel like I'm kind of naturally inclined to enjoy science classes, and that tends to lead to medical careers. And so that's another not exciting thing, but just, kind of how I found my interest. So you've got to think about for yourself, why did you pursue this? And then I do want to know how you found out about the PA profession as well. It's still a new profession. I don't know if any of y'all went into college knowing you wanted to be PAs. If you did, that's awesome. But I think for the most part, people find it later on, either once they've already started college or even after graduation. And so I want to know how you found out about it. Was it a personal encounter? Was it through research, through a teacher, through the pre-PA club at your school? Showing that this is something that I found out about, it was intriguing to me, so I followed up and figured out more about it, helps to show that you have a true understanding of the profession, and you didn't just say, oh, PAs were ranked number 1 on the US News and World list, so that sounds like a great job. That's what I'm going to do. There has to be more than that. There's more of a process. Even if that is how you found out about, that's great. But then what did you do from there? So I do want to know that initial point where you kind of had an encounter or found out about PAs. After you found out about it, what appeals to you about the PA profession? This one's a little difficult because it requires understanding of the profession, but I want to know, and it gets hard too, because a lot of medical professions are very similar, but everything you're including should be specific to PAs, which is the collaborative teamwork. That's a big point that needs to be emphasized. There's also, the lateral mobility, which is kind of a perk of the profession. But the schooling is a great model, and that's something you can emphasize. It shouldn't be your main reason. The main reason needs to be the roles and responsibilities and daily grind of being a PA. And that does come from having some experience or discussion with PAs to really understand that. So beyond helping people, beyond just patient care, because you can do those in a lot of ways, I want to know what about the PA profession and the way it's set up is what you want to pursue and why. And you've got to incorporate your personality to show me why it's a good fit for you. So I will also want you to demonstrate beyond what you like about it, that you do have that understanding of what PAs do. That usually will come from shadowing PAs or working with them, and using specific stories and examples is going to be more effective than just saying PAs can diagnose patients, PAs can prescribe medicines, PAs work with doctors. If you can say, while shadowing Megan, a hospitalist PA, I observed as she evaluated a patient for chest pain and ordered an EKG. She was pretty sure the results showed a heart attack, so she consulted with the physician who agreed, and they, due to comorbidities, came up with an adequate treatment plan. Obviously that needs polished, but you walked me through what a PA does while telling me and showing me that you had that experience with PAs. And that's more of what I'm looking for, compared to just listing out a definition. All right, I feel like I'm throwing a lot at y'all, so I hope you're not getting too overwhelmed. But then after we know that you know what PAs are, you decided to become one, what have you done to prepare to be successful as first a PA student and as a PA? This is highlighting your patient care experiences, your volunteering, your shadowing, and your academic success. And that's the one that people forget the most. You need to keep in mind that you are applying for a spot as a PA student, not as a that you've handled them of a are oh, I didn't freeze. Did I freeze?
Just a little bit. We're good now.
We're back. Okay, awesome. Hopefully I don't go away. This is one of the first times I've done this in this house, so we'll see how the internet is, I guess. But anyway, so I want to know that you can handle the schoolwork side of PA school and do well. And so if you have a GPA that meets the minimums of the program, that is considered a competitive GPA, and you can highlight that. And you can say, you know, I have a competitive GPA. Even if it's low, it doesn't matter because you've hit those points and you're competitive. So you've got to emphasize your strengths in that way and really show that you are, you know, you want to work in medicine and you're prepared moving forward to do so. All right, so we're going to start writing. We've talked about some ways to do that. You can figure out your introduction later, and that will usually be a significant story or example, or more of kind of just jumping into your story and going chronologically. The things you want to keep in mind as you're going through is, does my essay make sense? Is it easy to follow? Or am I raising more questions than providing answers? And so the ways that I see that happening the most are people will put in kind of just these general statements that don't really tell me anything, but make me go, they'll be like, I learned about leadership, and then move on. I'm like, well, what did you learn about leadership? What role were you in that you learned about leadership? Like, tell me more. So if you're seeing some areas where it's kind of like, okay, tell me more, you need to go into more detail or decide if it's even worth including. Another issue I see a lot is not including a conclusion or having like one sentence at the end. And so in an essay, I do expect to see a conclusion. That's your last chance to convince the reader that you deserve a spot in their program. So I want you to sum up your strengths, really emphasize what you're going to bring to their program as a student, what your goals are, and that you're ready to take on becoming a PA. It should be a very confident statement. A lot of people will also say, like, I can't wait to be a compassionate provider. And, you know, you're trying to be a compassionate PA, not a provider. So you want to make sure you're using terminology that kind of shows where you want to end up. All right, so let's say we have done all the writing, feel like we have a pretty good draft. Then we move on to editing. So for the editing phase, number one, grammar, spelling, punctuation. Do a spell check. Make sure you don't see anything very obvious. Grammarly is an online, y'all may have used that in class, I don't know, but it's kind of a plugin, or you can go online and use it. They have a free version and a paid version. I don't know what extra stuff they have in the paid version, but it's kind of a spell check on steroids. So you could run your essay through that, make sure it looks good, but really look for those distracting errors. It's not a lit paper, so we're not maybe expecting complete perfection, but on the same page, like we want it to be something that is very enjoyable and easy to read. So check for those things. And then with content, go back to those questions, make sure you answer them thoroughly. Make sure your flow is good. It's easy to follow. You have transitions between paragraphs. It's not just blocks that don't really go together. We want it to all kind of, you know, be a continuation throughout your entire essay. And then look for anything confusing. If you need clarification, if you need more detail, try to polish those things as much as possible. So then it's time to ask for some outside opinions. And this is where you have some different options. Family and friends are great. They know you, and so they can speak to whether your essay reflects your voice. The thing they don't know is about PA school admissions, or PA school really. So take their recommendations with a grain of salt in that regard. But, you know, find some trusted people to ask. There's a fine line and a fine balance between asking, oh gosh, where's my mouse? It's gone. Okay, somebody was trying to get in. There's a fine line between asking, you know, a few trusted people and asking like 20 people. If you get too many opinions, it's going to become a little confusing. So find some people that you really trust their judgment and really, you know, use their opinions. If your school has any resources as far as pre-health advisors, pre-PA advisors, writing centers, take advantage of those. You know, it's not going to hurt anything, and you may find somebody who's really great and can help you a lot. So look into those types of resources. Try to have a PA read your essay, even if it's somebody that you've shadowed or worked with. Again, just keep in mind they may be somewhat removed from admissions and that process of becoming a PA. So, you know, ultimately, no matter who you have read it, you get the final say about what's included and what you put into your essay. There are services. I edit for my PA resource. So if you do want someone, you know, to read it, we do it anonymously, and we're all PAs who have mostly helped with admissions. You know, you can go that route. And then avoid unknown eyes. And this is something I've had to start including over the past couple of years. If any of you are in our Facebook group, the Pre-PA Club, it's awesome. So many questions answered there. We have, I think, 14,000 members, which is a lot. I'm sure some of those are PA students now. But if you find someone random to send your essay to, or post your essay, which we don't allow, but there are other websites where you can post your entire essay, that is a little dangerous, and you could potentially end up with someone else choosing to use your essay. So I would not recommend doing that. Stick to, I mean, y'all have a great club, like use each other and use people you trust, not someone random that you don't know. Because we've had 2 instances in the past year of essays being used by people that it was not their essay. So that's a problem. All right, so addressing discrepancies, any red flags or things that you're unsure of whether you should talk about. The one that comes up the most is a low grade or a low GPA, sometimes breaks in education, any other red flags. My rule of thumb is if you think it is something that could prevent you from getting an interview, it's worth including in your personal statement. And that is your chance to explain what happened. Some schools will give you supplementals to do that, some will not. But if you had one really bad semester that brought your GPA down, it may be worth saying, I struggled during this semester because of X, Y, and Z. I was overcommitted. I was working full time and taking a full load. Didn't know how to study appropriately, whatever. And then go into, most importantly, being very positive about that situation and taking what you learned from it, not making excuses and showing improvement. So being able to say, I learned to balance my schedule more efficiently, to say no, to ask for help, and those kinds of things that would be important, and just showing that you aren't going to make that mistake again in the future. So these are my most common mistakes, which I like to include. I have a whole podcast episode I did on mistakes because I could talk about them probably for a long time. And this book has a whole chapter in it too on them. But physician's assistant, there's no apostrophe S. You want to make sure that you know the name of the profession you're doing an essay for. I don't think this is personal. Like, I don't get offended at this or think it's a big deal, but the people you're writing to are in academics, and so they're probably going to be a little more picky than anyone else. So just physician assistant, no apostrophe S. Confusion, that's just my personal pet peeve. And then grammar, punctuation, spelling mistakes. I've seen essays too now that one of them decided to save on characters, they would delete all commas. And that was a problem. It made it really hard to read. And I was like, you cannot just delete commas. The other one decided to just delete all spaces between sentences. You're fine to put one, but you need at least one. You can't have none because it's, again, terrible to read. So, you can't cut corners there, but you want to make sure everything's as correct as it can be. Losing the focus from you. I mentioned earlier that it's important to use stories and specific examples. So if you're talking about, let's say we're talking about patient care experience, and I say, I helped Miss Smith get dressed for the day, and then I was getting her up and she collapsed on the bed and went really pale, and her heart was racing, but I could tell that she wasn't breathing that well. So I called rapid response, and they came in and did CPR and put in an IV, and then she woke up, and we figured out that she had taken too much medicine. So she went to another floor and came back 2 weeks later, and she was doing a lot better, but needed rehab. Okay, that's cool. But I just learned a lot about Miss Smith and not as much about you. I would rather hear, I responded by calling rapid response and staying calm and checking her vitals and trying to adequately communicate with the team, but also that I wanted more knowledge about how to help Miss Smith in the future. I might freeze again. It's telling me my internet is unstable. So you want to just make sure if you're telling a story, you're focusing on you and what your role was. We definitely care about Miss Smith. We want her to be okay. But in this essay, I don't really need to know what happened with her. Okay, other mistakes, cliches and quotes. You don't really need any quotes. You don't really need cliches like sayings or phrases that kind of just life sayings. There really isn't a place for it. They end up taking up space and not really adding anything to your essay. What most people will try to do is they'll say this quote is what I based my life on or whatever. But you could just tell me what what you like or what is meaningful to you without including the quote in most cases. So usually you don't need a quote. Rhetorical questions or dialogue, or putting you in there, like I hope you consider me, or when you have a sick patient, you do this. There's not really a place for that in a formal essay either. You want to keep it in first person, which is fine to do. Sometimes people ask, like, how do I, like, I'm not supposed to use I in an essay, but this essay you are. So you are talking about yourself, and that's totally fine. But we just don't want any of those kind of sayings and things that take up space. If anyone is a reapplicant, you don't want to use the exact same essay. Your themes will be the same. Your reasons for being a PA will be the same, but you want to show improvement. You want to show that you've done things differently, what you've done since a previous application cycle. I use a metaphor in the personal statement guide. Basically, if you were to bake a cake and it comes out really dry, you're not going to use the exact same recipe next time. You're going to change something. So think about your application the same way. If you applied once and you didn't get accepted, you need to change some things up to make it more effective. All right, here's my contact information, and then we can do some Q&A if anyone has questions. There we go.
Thank you so much, Savanna. We can go ahead and jump into the Q&A now. Christy, do you want to start us off with the first question?
Yes, sure. So the first question that we have from one of our members is, how do we approach writing our personal statements if we don't have any transformative or huge life experiences to write about?
So I think I kind of covered that. I mean, you just tell your story, and even if it's not what you feel is significant, it's still going to be good. There are 2 essays I've read that I remember as just being like the best essays I've ever edited or read, and neither one had a major life event. They just told their story in a way that was so cohesive and incorporated like little things about themselves throughout the essay that by the end I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I know this person. I know they would be a great PA, just because of all these kind of little things they've included with, when you're telling a story, incorporating a strength of yours by doing it subtly. Like being bilingual is one, like instead of saying like, I am bilingual and I translated, being able to say, while on a mission trip in the Dominican Republic, I was speaking with one of our Spanish speaking patients, and I was the first person to really understand what they were going through and relayed that to the doctor. That tells me like you're compassionate, you're a good listener, and you're bilingual. So really work on kind of your phrasing and trying to incorporate some of those small things in, and just create a complete picture of who you are. It does not have to have a big major event. And honestly, those get kind of old when we have these like crazy descriptions of these crazy events, and they're sometimes a little far-fetched. They're a little hard to believe after a while.
Thank you, Savanna. So our next question is from another member. Should the personal statement be centered around one anecdote with numerous points being made based on that single anecdote, or multiple experiences to make separate points?
That's a good question. In most cases, I would say 99% of the time, you're gonna have multiple anecdotes to answer all of those questions and have a complete essay. There's not really going to be one story that answers all of that. And so it's going to be, because I want to know about you at different points in your life. And so you really can't encompass that with just one story.
All right, thank you so much. So our next question is there such thing as being too personal in your personal statement? And how would you recommend applicants to find that perfect balance between being too personal versus also being authentic?
go back to that prompt and ask yourself, is what I'm trying to include directly relevant to why I want to be a PA? If the answer is yes, it's worth including. If the answer is no and something you just want to tell them, save that for a supplemental. Sometimes this comes up with like sharing personal health issues or challenges, and there's a way to incorporate those things confidently and in a way that shows that they're not going to be an issue when it comes to PA school. Versus sometimes it does come across as, you don't want to make your reader worried that something could prevent you from completing the program. So you have to be a little selective as far as that goes, and include what you think is important for them to know, but also still relevant to that prompt of why do I want to be a PA? Has this had an impact on that decision or mattered in the grand scheme of things? And if not, I wouldn't include it in your essay.
Thank you, Savannah. So the next question is, can you give applicants more insight on personal statement editing services? Who would you recommend them to?
Sure. So I edit for my PA resource. There are a few out there, and I work with them for a couple reasons. All the editors are PAs. There are some companies that just use like English majors, which I just feel like, I don't know. And then some are like PA students, but I feel like to completely edit well, and that's why we only have PAs that do mock interviews too and not students. You really need to have been through all of it, like the pre-PA part, the application part, being a student, being on rotations, taking boards, and working as a PA. Because I don't know, you just need to be able to see all of that. So at my PA resource, it is all PAs. Turnaround time is pretty quick. We edit for content primarily, and definitely grammar and flow as well. But yeah, usually my essays that I send back are very, very, very read. And I like to add, it's not all bad. There's a lot of good comments in there, and I comment on the stuff that is done well, and then the stuff that needs some help too, to give some constructive criticism there to try to make it a well-rounded essay.
All right, thank you, Savannah. Our next question is, how would we approach the COVID-19 essay, and what are some things that you recommend that we be sure to discuss or not to discuss in that section?
That's a good question, which I think they have said it would be on this application. I'm pretty sure this next cycle. I don't know if it'll be there past this cycle. We'll see. So the COVID essay, you have 2,500 characters, so about half the length of the regular essay. And the prompt for that basically says, like, tell how COVID-19 has affected your path to becoming a PA. And then it has different categories like academic experiences and then personal. I've read a lot of COVID essays. A good one, I would say, be very direct and cover as much of that as you can if it affected you. So if your classes were moved online, tell me that. Tell me which classes. Tell me if labs were moved online. Tell me how you did. Did you do well with that transition, or did you struggle with that transition? If you had the option for pass fail, but you chose to take a grade, tell me why and that you did that. If you had any changes in your testing or anything was delayed, tell me that. And then when we get to experiences, those are the ones where you really want to be specific. So if you say, I had some shadowing lined up, but it fell through and I wasn't allowed to come, that's not enough information for me. I'd rather you say, I had planned on having 50 shadowing hours with the dermatology PA, but it was put on hold. I'm anticipating being able to complete that in July of 2021. This is your chance to explain basically how your application would have looked differently if COVID never happened. So you want to show that. Same thing with patient care experience. My shifts were cut down to 2 shifts a week. This led to a loss of 500 patient care hours. I'm now back to a full-time schedule. and that. Personally, if COVID did affect you in a personal way, you can include that. The thing I would say to avoid doing is I've read some that are like, COVID-19 affected the world in such a dramatic way, and we're all different. And it goes into this like drawn out thing telling me how COVID has affected us. And I'm like, okay, we all got that. We all know by now that COVID affected us. So we don't have to rehash that, like just get into it. And so that's kind of the approach to that type of essay.
That was great insight. What are some things to keep in mind when completing supplemental applications for schools that do have them?
So supplementals are your way of communicating directly with a program. And so those can be school specific, whereas your personal statement is not, and you want them to be. Look at the program websites, use their mission statements, really make it specific, use language from the mission statement, language from their prompt to show your points very clearly. And the nice thing about supplementals is they do tend to be somewhat similar between programs. So after you've written some, you can reuse some of your content a lot of times. Just double check that you're putting the right school name when you submit, because I get messages every year like, I accidentally submitted with the wrong name. What do I do? And you really can't do anything. So just double check that before you submit. But then you can like really go into detail. You can pull things from your personal statement, but you would want to expand on it and you don't want to directly copy anything from your personal statement.
All right, thank you for that, Savannah. Our next question before we open up the floor is, if someone is really struggling with drafting their personal statement and is experiencing writer's block, what last pieces of advice would you like to give them?
I think doing the brainstorming worksheets or the email course would be most helpful, just to help you kind of basically have some hand holding through the process. Because it can be hard if you're just trying to start with a blank piece of paper. But if you can have some help and guidance, that'll at least get some words on the paper, and then you can refine them a little bit.
Okay, so to our members, you can go ahead and unmute to ask some questions or type it in the chat box. I see that we have a few in the chat box. Savannah, do you have to rewrite your personal statement as a reapplicant? If yes, how do you recommend rewriting it when you feel like your current one sums up your experience perfectly?
You don't have to rewrite the entire thing, but as a reapplicant, if I'm reading a reapplicant essay, I expect to see and be able to tell like what the differences were between cycles, like what new experience you got, or how you've matured, how you feel more ready, what has changed between the cycles. A lot of schools will pull your previous application and compare the essays. So if there's no changes at all, it kind of just looks lazy that, I just submitted again, even though the first time it wasn't completely where it needed to be. The other thing, and it's hard to put a blanket statement on reapplicant essays, because you have to think about different things. So let's say you applied and you got a bunch of interviews. That tells me your essay was probably pretty good, but something maybe was off in the interview. So I wouldn't expect you to make as many changes to it. If you applied and you didn't get any interviews, in that case, I would do more work on your essay and double check all the requirements. But that would tell me, something was off on your application, and maybe it was partly the personal statement. So you'd want to refocus there a little bit.
Okay, thank you so much. If there's not any more questions, this concludes our personal statement workshop. Thank you so much to the Pre-PA Club at UCLA for partnering with us, and Savannah for leading this workshop. Thank you to our members for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a good Saturday. Thanks for joining me on Saturday.